What happened to Dr. Samira Mohan? The Pitt exit explained. Warning: major spoilers for the Pitt Season 2. Dr. Samira Mohan, played by Supriya Ganesh, does not die and is not fired from Pittsburgh Trauma Medical Center. Her residency reaches its conclusion, and she ultimately moves on from the hospital. Supriya Ganesh will not return as a series regular in Season 3. The show's creators have described the departure as a story-driven decision reflecting the reality of a teaching hospital where doctors and residents naturally move on. So, what actually happened to Dr. Samira Mohan in the Pit? Her exit surprised many viewers because Samira had been one of the show's most important characters since Season 1. She wasn't killed. She wasn't involved in a shocking medical tragedy. And there wasn't a dramatic scene where she was fired or told to leave. Instead, her story ends in a much quieter and more realistic way. Samira finishes her residency and moves on to the next stage of her medical career. And that's actually consistent with how the Pit has always portrayed life inside a teaching hospital. Who is Dr. Samira Mohan? Samira Mohan is a senior resident at Pittsburgh Trauma Medical Center. Throughout the first 2 seasons, viewers watched her grow from a relatively inexperienced doctor into a much more confident emergency physician. Her character was particularly interesting because she wasn't always certain that emergency medicine was where she belonged. She struggled with difficult cases. She sometimes questioned her abilities. And she had to deal with the enormous pressure of working in an emergency department where decisions can literally mean the difference between life and death. But over time, Samira became increasingly capable. She developed stronger relationships with her colleagues and became an important part of the team. That's why her Season 2 exit feels so sudden. Why did Samira leave? The real reason is connected to her residency ending. Samira had reached the point where she needed to decide what would come next. Throughout Season 2, she was thinking about her future after residency. Would she stay in emergency medicine? Would she pursue another specialty? Would she remain in Pittsburgh? Or would she move closer to her family? Those questions become increasingly important during the season. The showrunner, R. Gemmill, explained that Samira simply won't be working the shift covered by Season 3. He emphasized that people naturally come and go in a teaching hospital. So there isn't some secret murder or dramatic explanation. Samira's medical training has reached a transition point. Does Samira die?
No.
This is probably the most important thing to clarify. Samira is alive at the end of Season 2. The show doesn't kill her off. In fact, her ending is deliberately open-ended. That means there is nothing preventing the character from potentially appearing again someday. But for Season 3, Supriya Ganesh is not returning as part of the cast. That's why it's more accurate to say that Samira left the hospital and the series, rather than saying she was killed off. What happens to Samira in the Season 2 finale? The Season 2 finale gives Samira a relatively quiet ending. Rather than putting her through another catastrophic emergency, the story focuses on her thinking about her future. She's reached a major crossroads. Her residency is ending, and she has to decide what kind of doctor she wants to become. One of the most meaningful conversations she has is with Dr. Robbie Robinovich. Robbie is also struggling with his own future. He's considering taking a sabbatical because his mental health has deteriorated significantly. That gives Samira and Robbie an unexpectedly emotional conversation about life, careers, and the expectations they once had for themselves. Robbie admits that his life hasn't turned out the way he imagined.
Samira listens.
And his words clearly affect her. Why is her conversation with Robbie important? Robbie tells Samira that he once imagined having a completely different life. He thought he would be married. He imagined having children. He imagined owning property and building a family. Instead, he spent much of his adult life inside the emergency department. And now he's questioning where that life has taken him. Samira responds with a simple but meaningful idea. It's never too late. That conversation works as a kind of farewell between the two characters. Robbie is preparing to leave temporarily. Samira is preparing to leave permanently. Both characters are standing at crossroads. And both are asking whether they can still change the direction of their lives. What career does Samira choose? The show doesn't give viewers a definitive answer. That's one of the reasons her exit feels different from a traditional television departure. Throughout season 2, Samira considers several possibilities. She thinks about emergency medicine. She also considers geriatrics and other areas of medicine. But by the end, she hasn't been given a huge "this is what I'm doing next" announcement. That's intentional. Her story is about transition. She's leaving residency. She's deciding what comes next. And the audience doesn't necessarily need to know every detail. Was Samira forced out of emergency medicine? Not exactly. However, season 2 does show Samira questioning whether emergency medicine is sustainable for her long term. The workload is enormous. The emotional toll is severe. And she's seen firsthand how difficult the environment can be. That's not the same as saying Samira isn't capable of being an emergency physician. In fact, much of her character development suggests the opposite. She has become very good at the job. The question is whether being good at something means you have to spend your entire career doing it. And Samira eventually appears to recognize that she has other possibilities. Why did the writers remove her? According to reports, Samira's exit was story-driven. The producers wanted the show to reflect the reality of a teaching hospital. That's important because The Pitt isn't structured like a traditional workplace drama where the same characters necessarily stay together forever. Residents graduate. Doctors move to different hospitals. People take fellowships. Some change specialties. Others leave medicine altogether. Noel explained that because the show jumps forward between seasons, keeping the entire ensemble together indefinitely wouldn't necessarily be realistic. That's why cast changes are expected to be part of The Pitt going forward. What did Supriya Ganesh say about leaving? Ganesh has spoken about her departure, although she hasn't provided some dramatic behind-the-scenes explanation. When asked about the decision, she pointed toward the show's producers and creative team, saying they make their choices intentionally. She also expressed sadness about leaving Samira behind. And that makes sense. Samira was Ganesh's role for the show's first 2 seasons and became a fan favorite. Ganesh has also talked about her hopes for Samira's future, suggesting she would like the character to find an attending who truly believes in her abilities and allows her to thrive. What happens to Samira's mother? Family is another important part of Samira's season 2 storyline. She spends time thinking about her relationship with her mother and what her family expects from her. That's another reason her decision about the future is complicated. Samira isn't simply deciding between 2 medical specialties. She's also deciding what kind of life she wants. Does she remain in Pittsburgh? Does she move closer to home? Does she follow the career path expected of her? Or does she finally choose something for herself? The ending doesn't give us every answer. And that's what makes it feel more like real life. Is Samira leaving Pittsburgh? The show has not provided a definitive, detailed explanation of exactly where Samira goes next. The important point is that she is no longer working the shift at Pittsburgh Trauma Medical Center when season 3 begins. Gemmill has essentially left the door open by saying she simply isn't working that particular shift. So it's possible that Samira could theoretically return in a future season. There has been no indication that she is dead. There is no permanent never again explanation built into the story. For now, however, she is gone. What does her exit mean for The Pitt? Samira's departure establishes something important about the series. The hospital is bigger than any one character. Doctors come and go. Residents graduate. New doctors arrive. And the emergency department continues operating. That's actually one of the show's strengths. If every character stayed forever, the hospital wouldn't feel like a real medical institution. Instead, Season 3 introduces new dynamics while continuing the stories of characters who remain. That includes Robbie's return after his sabbatical. Could Samira return? Possibly. There is no confirmed Season 3 return for Supriya Ganesh. But because Samira isn't killed, the character technically remains available for a future appearance. The showrunner's explanation is especially interesting because he didn't describe Samira's story as permanently closed. He simply said she won't be working that shift. That leaves room for the character to return someday if the story calls for it. But as of the current Season 3 information, viewers shouldn't expect Samira to be part of the regular cast. The real meaning of Samira's ending. Samira's story is ultimately about figuring out what kind of doctor and person she wants to become. She entered the pit uncertain. She made mistakes. She learned. She became more confident. And then she reached the end of her residency. That's not failure. It's actually the natural conclusion of her training. Her decision to move on doesn't erase everything she accomplished at PTMC. Instead, she takes those experiences with her. And that's why her departure is bittersweet rather than tragic. Final answer. So, what happened to Dr. Samira Mohan? Samira did not die. She completed her residency at Pittsburgh Trauma Medical Center and moved on to the next stage of her medical career. Season 2 spent considerable time showing her thinking about what she wanted to do after residency, including whether emergency medicine was still the right path for her. Her final scenes, including her conversation with Robbie, suggest that she's ready to begin a new chapter. Supriya Ganesh's departure from the pit was confirmed ahead of Season 3, and the show's producers have described it as a story-driven decision. The creators have also stressed that a teaching hospital naturally has a revolving door of residents and doctors. So Samira leaving isn't supposed to mean that something terrible happened to her. It's supposed to feel like a doctor finishing one chapter and moving into another. Season 3 will take place several months later, and Samira won't be part of the regular team. But because the character wasn't killed, her story remains open. She could be somewhere else pursuing another specialty. She could be completing a fellowship. She could be closer to her family. Or she could eventually discover that emergency medicine really was where she belonged. For now, we simply don't know. And perhaps that's the most realistic part of Samira's ending. She didn't fail. She wasn't fired. She wasn't killed. She simply reached the end of her residency and chose to move forward. And after watching Samira grow for 2 seasons, that's a surprisingly fitting way for her story to continue, even if we don't get to watch it happen.